Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Culture for All Digital Festival 2021 Week 4. We started this festival in January 2021, and after almost a year celebration, we are concluding it in October and November. The festival, supported by Tata Technologies, has been curated with a focus on diversity and inclusivity, and we have performances, talks, workshops, trails, contests, and much more to keep you engaged with culture. The festival has been put together to celebrate the release of first of its kind interactive, multilingual, open access digital cultural map by Sahapedia, map.sahapedia.org. Let us give you a glimpse of the website. Thank you. So we'll continue. Welcome to week 4 of the festival. In today's session, we will discover the ideas and inspiration behind Arshia Sattar's book, Favorite Stories from Hindu Myths, and what the author's known favorite stories are. Before we begin this conversation, let me introduce you to the speakers. Arshia Sattar is a writer and acclaimed Sanskrit translator. She has a PhD in classical Indian literature from University of Chicago and works with Sanskrit epics and storytelling traditions of India. She is known for her best-selling children-friendly books, including Ramayana for children, Mahabharata for children, and Adventures with Hanuman. R. Sivapriya is publisher, literary and translation at Bloomsbury India. Previously, she's also worked with Juggernaut Books and Penguin India and has edited Arshia Sattar's books. Welcome both. It's our pleasure to have you with us today. I now request you to begin with this exciting session.
Thank you, Ela. Hi, Arshia.
Hi, Siva.
How are you?
All the better for seeing you. It's the only way it happens these days, but
I know.
Good. Are you well?
I'm well. I'm well.
Good. No COVID?
No, that's good. Are you in Bangalore? Are you in Pune?
Oh, with my mom in Pune, but I'm going back on Monday to Bangalore. So soon enough, yeah. I was very pleased that the Sahapedia map, interactive map, landed on Pune, and I was like, oh, surely that's for me. And it's right, my neighborhood, Aga Khan Palace and all that.
Oh, synchronicity.
Totally.
So, Arshia, can we start with something really simple?
Okay.
Could you tell us what makes a story a myth? What exactly is a myth?
Siva, that's the hardest question in the world. Nobody's ever answered it to any kind of satisfaction or consensus. Mainly, okay, the easiest thing to say about myths is that they're about gods. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And another way to define a myth is to say what it's not, which it's not a legend, which usually involves human characters who have become larger than life. Prithviraj Chauhan, for example, possibly Birbal, Mullah Nasruddin, yeah. And then there's folklore, which is very, very local and very, very specific, right? That also has gods, but it often has gods in a more playful mode. It often has local deities, but myths, using the Indian example, typically myths have the pan-Indian gods, and very, very clearly they have gods from the Sanskrit tradition. So in India, we can say that in some sense, myths belong to an elite category, and myths are in Sanskrit. And our biggest collections of myths, of course, are the Puranas, but myths appear everywhere. They appear in the Vedic corpus. Of course, the epics are littered with myths. It's sort of like, a myth when you meet a myth, So, yeah. And Wendy Doniger, my teacher, she has, I think, one of the better definitions of myth, and she claims it's not hers, but I got it from her, so I always attribute it to her. And she says, a myth is a lie that tells the truth. And that, I think, it's a wonderful definition. It's very nuanced. It's very true to the power of myth. It makes very, very clear reference to the way we receive myths and the kind of belief that we have in myths, right? And so I find that a very, very useful definition. It's a meta definition in a way. It doesn't tell you what it is unless you know it already. And myths also, perhaps a little bit more dangerously, myths are what separate people from each other, right? That if you believe the same myth as I do, then you are an us. If you don't believe that myth, then you are a them. And it's not always dangerous that myths have that function of separating people from each other, but it is a function that they perform. Just like epics, epics are very often conflated with so-called national identities now more than ever. So these are all fluid categories as well. I think we would be doing damage to myths and harm to ourselves if we were to just hermetically seal them and say myth is this and it's A and not X, Y, or Z. So.
And I suppose the corollary of saying that they separate us from them is also they help us find community. For instance, South Asia would be a community that believes in the stories of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, for instance.
Yes.
And that leads me to segue into the next question, which is you have retold the Mahabharata and the Ramayana for children. Fabulous. And you worked with these two particular stories, both for adults as a scholar and as a storyteller for children. And these two are the source of, I think, half the myths in the subcontinent. And in some senses, in the book itself, the Hindu myths, a lot of the stories lead to either the Ramayana or or Mahabharata unfolding. How did this come about? How did you get drawn into telling these stories? Where did it begin? How did it happen?
I don't know. I think stories always start in our childhood. No, that's when we are the most receptive to stories. That's when we receive them and appreciate them for what they are, which doesn't mean the children don't say, I like this story and I don't like this story. But, we hear our stories first when we are children. Every child, it doesn't matter who the child is or where the child lives or whether the child comes from a culture of literacy or orality, children hear stories. People tell children stories. It's what we do. And we tell children stories for multiple reasons. Sometimes just like, just so that you go to bed now, that's one very important reason. But often stories come to children in response to a question like, why does a giraffe have such a long neck? And, you would maybe read a child or tell a child Kipling's version of why the child has such a long neck. Or in India, you would say, why do snakes and birds hate each other? Oh, let me just tell you the story of Garuda and Vinata and Kadru. So stories give information, stories provide entertainment, stories also tell children who they are in terms, again, as you so rightly said, in terms of community. And in our sort of deracinated, secularized metropolitan world, and I use each of these terms as positive, not negative, deracinated, secular, metropolitan, many of us read stories or rather than hear them, or the stories are read to us. So I was a very lucky child. I mean, my parents were constantly reading to me. My mother clearly was not obsessed, she was interested in myths and stories from different places. So those were the books that I was being exposed to all the time. And it's a sort of family joke that, being a little girl, I would get a lot of dolls and I couldn't care less. I just wanted books. So the dolls were left unplayed with, but the books were very beloved. And maybe it also has something to do with the fact that I'm an only child. So, your companionship and comes really from your imagination. And there are, the most exciting friends you can have are mythological characters. Look at Hanuman. Who would not want Hanuman as a friend, right? I mean, he flies and he speaks Sanskrit. Isn't that what we all want to do, right? Whoever we are, secretly, that is our heart's desire to. So Hanuman is I mean, honestly, if I could have Hanuman as a friend, I'm not sure I'd need any human friends, you know? So yeah, I guess it started when I was young, and then when I was little, and then I sort of stayed with these stories, because really, it doesn't matter whether you're reading Hindu myths or Greek myths or, you know, Aboriginal First Nation stories from Australia, or cosmogonic origin myths from Kenya, or, you know, First Nations from the Americas. They are magic. And I think that is their power. So many things can happen. And a child's mind doesn't actually distinguish between the magical and the real. You know, the fact that Hanuman can fly, oh, yeah, of course he flies. It's only when you're 11 and somebody says, hey, he's not an aeroplane, man. And they say, oh, yeah, he can't fly. So I think everybody should. I think everybody should have a childhood with mythology, but mythology from everywhere, not just the one that is closest to you. Because when you read myths from many places, you realize that we're all actually saying the same thing. We're asking the same questions. We may not have the same answers, but our questions are the same. And I think that, you know, in a world that is getting increasingly fragmented and tribalized, it's a good thing to know that we are more alike than unalike. So, yeah.
I guess, yeah, some of these questions are, where do we come from? Where do we go?
Why we here, you know, where do we go? Everybody knows we go to die, right? And it's very clear about that. What happens to you after you die is, but really it's, why are we here? And what do we do now that we are here? You know, why are we like this and not like that? Myths tell us that as well. So myths provide one set of answers to existential and ontological questions. Now, those are very, very big words, but you know, it's really, who are we? Why are we here? Why are we the way we are? And as you said, where do we go from here? And philosophers answer those questions in certain ways. Literatures deal with those questions in very different ways. And myths is just another way of thinking through the big questions of what it means to be human, even though it's the gods, actually, who are playing out the parts in myth. Yeah.
But the questions are human, right?
I think so, yeah.
So Arshia, you seem to have many roles that you play. One of them is, of course, the scholar, the Sanskrit scholar, and you know, write these very insightful, critical essays and books on some of the epics that obsess you, especially the Ramayana. But I think the last 6 or 7 years, you have become something of an storyteller, especially telling myths and epics for children. How did that happen? As in, you know, why children? Was that something that interested you? What led you to start writing for children? And also after that, could we talk about the fact that there are hardly any children in myths, and what that actually means? But first, a little bit about, how did you become a storyteller for children, or myth teller for children?
You saw that switch from the more critical thinking about epic to the in a sense, the simpler pleasure of writing for children. You oversaw that transition. And for the many, many books that you have edited for me, that's another thing that I remain grateful for, that you were the one that oversaw that transition. It made it a lot easier. And God knows you gave me the confidence to do it, because, you know, it's funny, it's a big switch, but it's also a continuum, you know. I don't think it occupies two different parts of my brain, because really, even when I'm doing the critical work on Ramayana and writing those essays about what the Ramayana might mean, it's still based in the narrative, it's not philological writing. It counts on philology and history and all of that, all of which are other people's areas of expertise. But my work has always been, let's talk about the story. Let's see what the story is implying, if not necessarily saying. Let us read the story differently. Let us consider who is telling the story and to whom. And that sort of continues into writing for children. And I guess it all started because, well, you suggested it. Let's not forget that.
No, Arshia, I think you already started writing a little bit, no?
Okay, maybe I'd started, but it came really, well, really or not, I think where it came from is, after spending 30 years with Ramayana, I really felt like I wanted to own it. I wanted to tell my own Ramayana, and I didn't want to do it in the way that so many contemporary writers are retelling Ramayana, Ashok Bankar and Amish and Anand Nilkantan and Kavita Kane, and the list is kind of endless. And I'm glad that a lot of women are now joining that genre of writing, because it was terribly male dominated for a long time. So I didn't want to do it like that. I wanted to retell the story, Ramayana and Mahabharata, to make it as close to the original as possible, as close to the Sanskrit as possible. Because both with Ramayana and Mahabharata, the stories proliferate. There are, as Ramanujan tells us, we have 300 Ramayanas and counting, and we have many, many Mahabharatas. Every Indian language has a Ramayana and probably a Mahabharata, but the first text that we have for both of these epics is the Sanskrit one, for various and complicated reasons, which are not always about how great the story is, but canonization, elite languages, liturgical languages, all like that. Anyway, so I wanted younger readers to be able, in some sense, to feel the original rather than to feel the retelling. You know what I mean? So that in Ramayana especially, and Ramayana, because I'm familiar with the Sanskrit text, many of the images come from the Sanskrit text, many of the metaphors, many of the similes. I'm able to go back and pull out something from the Sanskrit that the child will understand. And so also with Mahabharata. So when they're reading my Ramayana or Mahabharata, in some sense, they're getting they're getting access to what is actually said in Sanskrit, and then they can read 100 other retellings, it doesn't matter. But a retelling, a transcreation, what we call transcreation, I'm not sure is the first place to start for younger readers, especially because now these texts have become so contentious, and we're told that there's only one way to think about this. There's only one version that we should read. It's good to get as close to the first version as you can, and then read, other stuff. And the Mahabharata and Ramayana, the stories are so powerful. It doesn't matter how old you are when you read them, and it doesn't matter whether you're Indian or Hindu or anything. Anybody who reads these stories is going to be captivated, because they truly are among the greatest stories in the world. So yeah,
that is true. But what about the stories that you told in this particular collection of Hindu myths? Are they? I suppose there that you had to use a bit more of your own imagination.
But again, it varies. I always, even for these stories, I went as close to the original not original, let's say. I went as close to a Sanskrit retelling as I could get. Right? And also, of course, each of these stories has multiple versions, even in the Puranas, right? Even in the epics, like, the story of Yayati, for example, which is not in this, appears in both Ramayana and Mahabharata, but with completely different intent, So, okay, the Garuda story, Vinata and Kadru and all that. I did go to Mahabharata for that. I also went to Robert Colosso, because everybody who retells the story and enriches it in some way. Everybody who retells the story adds a detail of their own. That's why Ramayana is so big. That's why Mahabharata is even bigger, because, a reteller is not an uninterested party. A reteller has skin in the game. I think in the Favorite Myths book, the stories vary quite a lot. Like there's Vinata and Kadru, then there's Narasimha, then there's Trishanku, for Christ's sake, then there is Indra and Vritra. So I think somewhere, when I started, I thought that one of the things I wanted to children to understand, younger readers to understand, is this constant conflict between the gods and the not gods, the asuras or the danavas or the daityas, yeah? And that there's a constant shift of power. Sometimes the gods are in charge of the three worlds, sometimes the asuras are, and they're distinguished by nothing other than their names. Their behaviors are identical. Gods are noble, asuras are noble, gods are vindictive and greedy, asuras can be vindictive and greedy, right? So it's sort of like the idea of what I think myths are, that whoever you are, you're the same, right? Whether you're a god or an asura, you share the same aspirations, you have the same qualities, you have the same ambitions, you have the same fears. So this constant conflict, I think, is an integral part of understanding the Hindu universe, that it is cyclical, that things come and things go, that we are always in a state of antagonism, as it were. And the other thing that led this particular collection was I wanted in some way to tell stories about our relationship with nature, right? Because I do think that in the last 10 years, and certainly for the conceivable future, the issue for younger people is going to be climate change. And ecological management and sustainable ways of living. And so that's why I have Khandava, the burning of the Khandava.
And you start with the churning of the ocean, right?
Exactly.
And that sounds very much like the dystopic present of mining and whatnot.
Yeah, especially for you Delhi people, Khandava is like at your doorstep.
Definitely today.
Yeah, not to mention, forest fires in Australia and, California and yeah. So, I mean, I sort of, particularly, that I don't enjoy being didactic, and I don't like to send out messages or lessons to young readers. I think that they have the imaginations and the discrimination to make their own decisions about what these stories are about and what they're saying. But I did want to indicate that, human beings, gods, asuras, not gods, all of us are in relation to nature. Even the gods are in relation to nature. And we've had, whether we're gods or humans or not gods, we've had multiple ways of relating to nature. And some of those ways have better consequences and some of them have not so good consequences. And I think Khandava and like the churning of the ocean and all that, Amrita Mantharna, I think those stories do say, do point to what are really very critical concerns for this century. So even though they're from, 2,500 years ago. So
I know. So, I mean, clearly the tellers of these stories, at whichever point they originated, were already thinking about how we interact with nature, right?
I think so. The Mahabharata, which of course starts with that horrible, malefic,
right?
Sarpa Satra, the perversion of a yajna, of a good yajna, a total perversion of Ashwamedha, for example. The Mahabharata is already like, this is not good. The Mahabharata itself is critical of the Sarpa Satra in a weird way. Even Janamejaya, who's the Yajamana, he's the sacrificer, even he is looking for a way to make it stop, as it were. So I think that, when we are in an exploitative relationship with the world around us, we feel the discomfort. So that was true 2,500 years ago, and it's true today as well. Today, perhaps more urgently. But then maybe the people who composed Mahabharata had their own sense of urgency about what was being destroyed in the way that they chose to live their lives. Quite apart from dharma, what else was being destroyed in the way that the Kauravas and the Pandavas occupied the world. So
I know we like to think that all this happened in the last 100 years, but this has been sort of in the making for a couple of thousand years, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. We're sort of, in a weird way, we're living on the tip of the iceberg. But there's a huge iceberg below us, and it's, as you said, it's been building for millennia.
We definitely accelerated it, but it's been Arshia, so do you have, before I ask you the question of what your favorite myth is, you've retold myths from within the universe of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. You've also retold myths from before, and I'm not sure if they come after. Are there any stories that come after the Ramayana and Mahabharata?
God, yes, the goddess myth.
Okay.
The link to the
Mahishasura and Durga.
What a surprise that the woman shows up last, right? But Shaktism and all of that is, at least a millennium after Mahabharata and Ramayana. And I think a lot of the myths that we find in the Vedic corpus and in the Brahmanas and the Aranyakas and all like that, they're repolished for the Puranas, certainly, and for the epics as well. I mean, the one that is most commonly traced is Trivikrama, the dwarf, which eventually becomes Vamana, the dwarf incarnation of Vishnu, because by that time Vaishnavism has become a real sort of theological presence within Hinduism, and lots of Narasimha. Narasimha is another example of that. The Narasimha myth probably existed well before it became a Vaishnavite myth. But Trivikrama, Vamana, appears first in the Rig Veda. There's a hymn about the 3 strides, and then it appears in the epic, and then it appears in the Puranas. So myths, like all great stories, actually, they stay with us over generations and through time. But each time they're rewritten, they're responding to something immediate. Like I think, in the book, the burning of the Khandava, it is impossible to read that story in that book now and not think of the forest fires in Australia and whatever. But even closer to home, I mean, you just look outside your window in any city and you see the trees being cut down because some mall is going to come up or some residential building. So the Khandava burning, and of course the forest was burnt so that Indraprastha could be built for the Pandavas, for their new capital, right? And now I think, when we see these new constructions in our cities and all of that, we're always thinking of the trees. But what about the birds and the snakes and the bugs and the insects? They're all, and Khandava is about that. How everything was destroyed. Had this book been written like 40 or 50 years ago, maybe Khandava would not have found a place even in the collection, and it would not have had the kind of resonance that it does now. So in the same way, the Vamana myth in the Puranas, in the full-blown magnificence of the Vaishnava tradition, has a completely different meaning from that little chappie in the Veda. It's the same story. It's exactly the same story. He takes 3 steps, and the 3rd step is upon the head of the Asura, Bali, right? Sometimes it's Bali, sometimes it's somebody else. But when the little person becomes Vishnu, it resonates. I mean, it thunders. It doesn't just resonate. It really becomes a very, very loud portrayal. Yeah.
So in some ways, I guess each variation is sort of it's you see human history or the questions that interest us sort of preserved in the amber of myth, right? So
and that is, in a sense, what you said right at the beginning. I mean, the wonder of myth is that it's timeless, but it's always understood and written in time. In a very particular historical moment, even though it claims to be talking about things that are eternal and cannot be defined by linear histories and, chronologies the way we think of them, but they exist in time and they're understood in time. Yeah.
So do you now to the question, do you have a favorite myth?
Always.
Or a set of myths?
Always. Always. Yeah.
Tell us what's the...
Tell the myth. Well,
the favorite one. Oh.
Well, there are many, many versions of the story, of course. And it's an old myth because you see it in sculpture before you actually have it canonized in the Puranas. The Mahishasura Mardini in Mahabalipuram.
Oh, that's a gorgeous.
Oh my God, it might even be my most favorite one in the whole world. Just her face and his face, and just the raw power that both of them exude, and it's in stone. I mean, that is just gobsmacking. Yeah. There's a couple in Ellora that are very, very beautiful. So I think partly my love for the myth, my adult love for that myth comes from seeing these sculptures. Yeah, because it just seems to me that is the most fundamental polarization in the human condition as we have known it, that between male and female, right? Now, I think perhaps that would not be as true because, we're speaking more fluidly of gender categories and, personal identities and sexual identities and gender identities. But certainly when I was growing up, there was man and there was woman. I also think that it's so, okay, first of all, here's the thing. The gods can't defeat him, can't defeat Mahishasura. So what do? Yeah, they have to put all their energies and all their weapons together and create a woman who is going to accomplish this, right? So even as a young girl, when I was listening to this, I was reading it, I was like, okay, that's kind of cool, right? We're better than the boys. So this woman is created, this goddess is created, and she, of course, she vanquishes the demon, which is the point of her existence. And she does it with such incredible grace. And when you see the sculptures and you see the expressions that have been bequeathed to her by the people who made the sculptures, they know what is going on. These are not like, just, acha chalo, we have to make lady's face. No, they've understood the emotions that she's feeling, the sort of the almost sadness that she has at killing this guy because he has fought so valiantly. And you see this mostly in the Durga Puja pandals in Calcutta. Well, I grew up in Calcutta also, so this is a very powerful recurring image in my imagination. The pandals with Durga and her lion killing, and the surrender in his death. He's willing to die because he realizes that he's been vanquished. And, I think that, again, not to be didactic, but there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lessons in this story. When do we surrender? When do we give up? When do we fight back? How do we live together?
In fact, in your telling, he seems a bit wonderstruck, at that last moment.
Yeah, thank you for noticing. Yeah, he's completely overawed. He doesn't, and the thing. Okay, he's the bad guy. He's the antagonist, as it were. But I love the fact that he is able to be wonderstruck by something that a woman has done. That he gives it up because he's like, what, she's better than I am. Right. And that's if there is a lesson for little girls, that's it. That, yeah, you can be bigger and stronger and better. You don't have to go around killing people, but that there are ways to feel very confident and very powerful as a woman. There's
something very glorious about this story. You have very good taste, I have to say.
There's something really glorious about that story. It's, I think, perhaps the only story we have that is unequivocally about a woman who knows she's powerful, and yet she's not. She doesn't misuse that power. No, the power is to do this. This is what I'm going to do. Thank you very much. I'm done. I'm going. So.
Is there also, are there myths, or is there any one myth that you sort of stay away from? Something that you may not like, or may not feel comfortable about, or may not agree with?
Well,
that has to say.
The Sati myth I find very, very, very disturbing.
But a foundational myth in some sense.
Yeah. Sati and Shiva and Daksha, and how, first of all, Daksha does not invite Shiva, your namesake, to his great sacrifice because he's polluting. He's like the bad boyfriend. He hangs out in the wrong company. He takes drugs. He plays around in graveyard. So it starts with an insider-outsider thing. It starts with an us and them. It starts with a hierarchy, and then Sati. God bless her. She gets so angry with her father that she throws herself into the fire. Right. And then Shiva comes and finds her body and, runs through the universe with it. And it's a burnt body. So bits of it are dropping off. Right. And they fall to the earth. And of course, they become Pithas. They become Sati Pithas, 3 Pithas. So Kamakhya and the one in Kerala. And, they become places where the goddess is worshipped and where women, I won't say women are sanctified. The goddess is worshipped, very different from women actually getting even an iota of the reverence and concern that goddesses get. But that for me is really, really disturbing. Gender-wise, caste-wise, yeah.
Well, it's a great example of how bloody the myths can be.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And a lot of them are. In fact, most of them are.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm kind of wondering if you can have a myth without blood and gore, because myths are fundamentally about conflict, and it's very easy and to spin it. Myths are about, the triumph of good over evil. No, they're not. They're about 2 equally matched sides or 2 equally matched.
Like you said, the gods and the asuras are not much of a difference.
Which one is which? You know, you really can't tell. If you were to read a myth without names, you would be hard pressed.
It's two sets of beings, yeah.
You know, so amplified in Mahabharata, for example. You know, who are the guys? You know, I mean, we say Pandavas are the good guys because Krishna fought on their side, and Krishna is Vishnu, he's God. But given what we know about how gods behave, not just in Hindu mythology, but, you know, in
Greek mythology, for instance.
in
Yeah.
Christian mythology, in Judaism, you know, in Islam and all, gods can be problematic. They can be jealous, they can be vengeful, they can be petty, you know. So yeah, I guess maybe Trishanku. Nobody dies in the Trishanku myth. The Trishanku myth is in there just because I just think it's so funny that he gets stuck in the middle, pushing it.
Poor man.
Poor man. All he wanted was to go to heaven in his body. I mean, I think I would like that, you know, if I go to heaven, if there is a heaven, if, you know, if, yeah, I'd like to experience heaven in my body. And this poor guy gets, you know, hung upside down.
That's not really a happy ending, Arshia. Sorry, no.
And you know, he had a mini happy ending with Vishwamitra made a parallel universe for him, right? And said, okay, you go live there. And they're like, no, you can't have that much fun. Sorry. they pull it back. Yeah. But I want to take just a minute to mention the illustrator Mansi Thakkar for the favorite Hindu myths book. I honestly, I think the illustrations are quite exceptional, and you know, we worked very hard to initially only to make sure that the pictures were not heavily Indianized, you know, and yet you know, they had to have some sort of cultural resonance, some kind of cultural specificity, you know, but no Amar Chitra Katha, no Raja Ravi Varma, none of this Chota Bheem kind of, you know, manga, whatever, not even, sorry, it's not manga, but you know, that kind of cartoonish.
No, but it does have a sort of surreal quality to it while being very rooted and real in its depiction.
Yeah, so I want to thank her very much for oh, I was so excited when I saw those pictures. It was just really quite something. So
they're kind of gorgeous, and the cover where you know, there's Durga and Mahishasura.
That's the image she worked on. She said, what do you want me to do first? I said, no, you should pick the image you want to work on first. And you know, like every good woman, that's the one she picked.
No, but you do describe that well, Arshia, in the sense of, you know, Durga and her beautiful wild hair is something you do register in the story.
Yes.
She's sort of picked on the right, I think.
Totally. And there's a very famous Bengali poem, of course. My memory is not what it used to be, but it translates. It speaks of Durga as Kali, actually, and it says. Clinton Seeley is the translator who is one of my teachers at the University of Chicago, and he translates it with grace and mercy in her wild hair. And I think that was the thing that I was really searching for, that the complexity of that emotion. She's killing him, but she's graceful and merciful at the same time, you know. Yeah.
Oh. So that's how images and poetic phrases and descriptions sort of carry, right, from the Valmiki Ramayana into your telling of the Ramayana for children.
Yeah, I think that's my greatest pleasure in reproducing these stories, whether they're epics or myths or anything, is to be able to carry something from the Sanskrit, from the original, into a contemporary language and into a contemporary retelling. That you know, if it works, if it sits there properly, then I'm just like, oh my God, okay, I can stop writing for today. You know, that kind of thing.
I guess we're sort of close to closing it, but could we revisit what I think it kind of got lost, which is there are no children in in the stories that become myths. Could we, what do you think? Have you thought about it? I mean, you have, but
Yeah.
what do you think that's about?
But that, I was thinking about that earlier today, because you very kindly sent me questions in advance. And I was thinking the closest we have really to a child in a classical myth, right? Not folktale, not legend, and all, Nachiket. Nachiket and Yajnavalkya, in the Upanishads, and his myth, as it were, is really in the quest for knowledge, right? So he appears in a genre of text that is not strictly a mythological genre, right? It's a philosophical text. It's a text that wants to think about what happens after death and all that. And Nachiketas is not a child. I mean, he's an adolescent, really, or maybe he's 10 or 12. And that's what makes him attractive, that he's 10 or 12, so it's important that he be young. But it won't work if he's 7 or 8, I don't know why. I think we are only interested in adults in mythology because I think...
So, I mean, myths, you begin hearing about it when you're a child. Right?
Yeah. So I think that, children can ask the questions, really, but somehow it's the adults, it's the gods who provide the answers. And nobody, it's not exciting to constantly be with somebody who's asking you questions. Yeah, we know that from children. What is that? Why is that? When will it come? All that. It's like, okay, baby, now enough, right? Why don't you go to sleep? But I don't know. I honestly don't know why children figure in folk tales a lot. The clever boy who finds the treasure buried in the field, or the child who's able to outwit the monster in some way. But no. Why do you think there are no children in myths?
I don't know. It really puzzles me. It struck me yesterday when I was, I've been reading the myths again, your retelling of them. And,
that's a very, actually, not to answer your question, but to sort of locate it in a larger context, children's literature is usually about children. Right? Myths that children read are not about children. And I think that's actually, it's kind of cool, that...
But what about these stories of baby Hanuman? I mean, there's of course the whole Krishna as a child set of stories, but where does the Hanuman story belong? Is that something that comes in the Ramayana or not at all, right? No.
Ramayana is quite simply the one story of how he mistakes the sun for a fruit, and he's hungry and he goes to get it, right?
And that he's told this so that he makes the jump to Lanka. No.
He told this. His mother has gone to bathe, and he's lying there and he's crying, and he's hungry, and he sees the sun. And because he is Hanuman, he thinks, oh, I'm going to eat that. And he flies up into the sky to reach for the sun. And of course, Rahu is coming from the other side, and Indra throws his Vajra and he falls down, he breaks his jaw. And that's why he's called Hanuman. So it's weird, actually, because the intent of the story is for us to understand his name. But it's a rubbish etymology, it doesn't really work. And then that's the story that we get in Kishkinda Kanda. But in Uttarakanda, there's a little bit more that, once he's empowered by all these boons and all like that, then he starts being a very naughty monkey. He starts harassing the sages and, disrupting their sacrifice and kicking the pots and like running away with the flowers and throwing stuff on them from trees. And so they curse him to forget who he is until he really needs to. But that's it. That's all the baby Hanuman. That's the only Bal Hanuman in Ramayana. So whatever is happening on television that goes on for months and years, I don't know who that person is.
Well, does it explain why he's such a beloved character? Because you meet him as a child in the myths?
I
wonder if some of it.
I think, Siva, it doesn't matter who you are or when you meet Hanuman, like you go to Ramlila, yeah, the moment Hanuman comes on stage, everything in the audience changes, everything. Men, women, children, grandmothers, dogs, cats, everybody's like, yeah, I think he appeals most immediately to children. And I think if we can extrapolate that he appeals to the child in all of us, but he appeals, to big, strong men who want to go to Akhada and become as strong as him, So, I mean, he's so multivalent that everybody, and he's a monkey. So the thing of the monkey, I think, is critical, because you can't stop watching monkeys. You cannot, because you just see yourself constantly. It's like, oh my God, is that what I look like when I eat? Or, that's what I look like when I pull out lice from my child's head, whatever. But, there is, honestly, I don't think there is anybody like Hanuman in world mythology, except, of course, for the Chinese monkey, Sun Yukong, because he's a Hanuman variant, and he has the same magical powers, that he is simultaneously extremely wise and very silly, and he's mischievous, and he's powerful, and he's a trickster, but he's brave, and he's loyal, and it's I don't know, I from all the stories that I know, which is quite a lot, Hanuman and the monkey, the magical monkey, is truly powerful. And there are monkey stories even before Hanuman. The Jatakas are full of monkey stories.
Right, and the Bodhisattva is often a monkey.
Bodhisattva is very often a monkey, and I'm sure stories from countries in Africa are full of monkeys as well. And it would be really interesting to see how their monkeys differ from ours, or how they are similar to ours, or how the monkey is located in those cultures and in those story universes. So my next book, Siva, the monkey.
Good one.
Yeah.
All right, Arshia, thank you, because I think we can keep going.
I think
so we should draw this to a conclusion. Thank you so much for being in conversation, and it's been such fun.
Yes, as always, thank you, Siva. Thank you, Sivapriya. Thank you, Sonia and Ila, who held this together. And I hope
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Ila.
Thank you, Arshia and Siva. That was an insightful conversation, and I would like you for joining us today. I also thanks everyone else watching the video. And before we sign off, let us remind you to go to visit map.sahapedia.org. Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.